I was sitting on the edge of the examination table, the thin paper crinkling under my weight, when Dr. Evans walked into the room holding the printout of my DEXA scan. He did not say a word at first. He just looked down at the paper, then looked down at my legs and slowly took his glasses off. He asked me what on earth I had been doing for the past 3 years. I am 73 years old now, and just a few years ago those same legs he was staring at were completely giving out on me. I used to stand at the bottom of my own front porch steps, staring up at them like they were a steep mountain I was not sure I could climb. I spent more than 3 decades walking on solid concrete floors in a logistics warehouse in Knoxville. I carried heavy boxes, I climbed steel ladders, I moved my body like it was a heavy-duty machine. When I retired, I just assumed the machine would keep running on its own momentum. It did not. I started noticing things that men my age rarely admit out loud. I noticed that the muscles in my thighs, the ones that used to be thick and solid from lifting crates all day, were starting to look thin and hollow. I noticed a distinct, terrifying shake in my knees when I walked down a flight of stairs. There was this split second of hesitation before I would step down off a curb in a parking lot. A sudden lack of trust in my own foundation. I was losing the ground beneath my feet, and I was trying my hardest to hide it from everyone around me. My daughter Megan is an occupational therapist, and she has a way of seeing right through my stubbornness. She came over for Sunday dinner one afternoon, watched me struggle to push myself up out of the deep armchair in the living room, and sat me down at the kitchen table. She did not use gentle words. She told me I was losing my foundation. She wrote a word down on a paper napkin and slid it across the table to me. The word was sarcopenia. It sounded like something you catch in a foreign country, but she explained that it was just the quiet, ruthless stealing of muscle mass that happens to folks our age. She pulled up a medical journal on her phone and showed me a number that felt like a physical punch to the chest. She showed me that over 30% of adults over 60 in this country are dealing with this silent muscle wasting, and most of them do not even know it is happening until they end up on the floor and cannot get back up. That hit me deeply. It hit me because I saw it happen to my buddy Tom a year prior. Tom was a guy who spent his whole life fixing classic cars in his garage. One day he lost his balance carrying groceries, fell hard, and broke a hip. He went from being a man who rebuilt transmissions with his bare hands to a man who sat looking out his living room window all day. His independence vanished in a single afternoon. I realized right then that ignoring the weakness in my legs was not pride. It was just foolishness. I decided I was not going to accept that fading away was mandatory. I was not going to wait until I needed a walker to move around my own house. I started walking every morning with actual intention. I hung some resistance bands from the rafters in my garage and started pulling on them. But the biggest change, the one that completely altered the trajectory of my body, happened when I started paying attention to the fuel I was putting into the engine. Over the next couple of years, through trial, error, and a lot of reading things Megan would print out and leave on my kitchen counter, I learned about 7 specific things. 7 specific fruits, believe it or not, that fundamentally changed how my body holds onto and rebuilds muscle. I am going to walk you through exactly what I found one by one because it was a process of discovery for me. And you really need to hear about the last one I discovered, the 7th one on my list, because that is the exact fruit that made Dr. Evans shake his head in disbelief when he looked at my scan. It is the one I eat every single morning without fail, and it changed everything. I am not a doctor. I am not a researcher in a lab coat. I am just a man from East Tennessee who refused to let his legs become useless. I have seen too many good men, proud men who worked with their hands their entire lives, just shrink away because they thought losing strength was just the tax you pay for getting old. I spent years watching this happen to guys I worked the loading docks with. Now I watch those same guys struggle to simply get out of a car seat. I figured out a different way, and I am sitting here talking to you today because I do not want you to be the person stuck in that car. I want you to know what I learned before your legs make the decision for you. Let me tell you about the very first thing I changed. During my late 60s, I started waking up in the middle of the night with these vicious cramps in my calves. My toes would curl up involuntarily, and I would have to bite the inside of my cheek so I would not cry out and wake my wife Linda. I thought it was just from standing on a ladder the day before. But I learned it was my muscles actually crying out for basic minerals they were no longer getting. That is when I started eating prunes. Now I know exactly what comes to mind. People think prunes are just something they serve in nursing homes to keep folks regular. But what I did not know was that these dark, chewy little things are absolutely loaded with potassium. When your potassium levels drop, your muscles misfire. They twitch, they cramp, and they become incredibly weak. I was reading a paper Megan left for me from some researchers at Tufts University. The numbers on the page stayed in my mind for days. It said that just getting enough of this specific mineral regularly could cut the risk of muscle weakness by 33% in older adults. 33% is not a small margin. That is the difference between catching yourself when you stumble on a rug and ending up in the emergency room. My neighbor down the street, Arthur, is 75 years old. He used to complain to me over the fence that his legs felt like heavy lead weights every afternoon around 3 o'clock. I told him to stop eating those salty pretzels he loved so much and to eat 3 or 4 prunes instead. Within a month, I saw him walking his golden retriever twice as far down the block. The inflammation goes down, the cramps stop. I do not do anything complicated. I just chop 3 or 4 of them up and throw them into my bowl of oatmeal in the morning. It gives my muscles what they need to actually contract and release the right way. Then came something I used to think was just a sweet snack for children. Red grapes. I never paid much attention to them in the grocery store. If Linda put a bowl of them on the table, I might grab one, but I never thought of them as tools for my physical body. But here is the harsh reality about aging that nobody translates into plain English for us. Our muscles are constantly rusting from the inside out. The doctors call it oxidative stress, but rust makes a lot more sense to a guy who spent his life around machinery. You feel this rust as deep stiffness in your joints. You feel it as a heavy fatigue that simply does not go away even after you sleep for 8 hours. I learned that the thick skins of red grapes contain a compound called resveratrol. It acts exactly like a wire brush scrubbing the rust off your muscle cells. It gets the blood flowing deep into the tissue where it is desperately needed. I saw some data from the National Institutes of Health that showed eating about a cup of these a day could help slow down age-related muscle loss by as much as 20%. 20% less muscle disappearing into thin air just because you ate a handful of grapes with thick skins. Linda started keeping a cold bowl of them in our refrigerator. We would sit out on the porch in the evening, and instead of eating crackers or cookies, we would eat those crisp red grapes. There is an older gentleman at my church named Henry. He is 68, a retired diesel mechanic. His hands and arms were getting so weak he told me he could not turn a heavy wrench anymore without his forearms burning like they were on fire. I got him eating those dark red grapes, and I told him to chew the seeds too, because the seeds hold a massive amount of that power. He told me a few months later that the burning ache in his forearms was mostly gone. He was back under the hood of his old Ford truck doing what he loved. Now, this next one caught me completely off guard when I learned about it. Most people think of it as a vegetable or a fancy side dish, but botanically it is a fruit, and it is an absolute powerhouse for your legs. Padron peppers. They are these small, mild green peppers. I used to go out to dinner occasionally with my son Derek, and he would order a plate of them blistered in a hot pan. I thought they were just for flavor. But Derek runs his own HVAC company. He is always lifting heavy air conditioning units and crawling under houses. He told me how his joints and muscles seemed to recover much faster when he ate them regularly. I looked into it myself. These little peppers are packed with an enormous amount of vitamin C and a compound called capsaicin. The capsaicin is what gives them that tiny kick of heat. But what it is actually doing inside your body is forcing your blood vessels to open up wide. It acts like a pump. pushing fresh oxygen straight into your tired, aching muscles. When I first started doing my resistance band workouts in the garage, I would be terribly sore for 3 days straight. My shoulders would ache so badly I could not even reach the top shelf in the pantry to grab a can of soup. But I started cooking 5 or 6 of these Padron peppers in a cast iron skillet with a little olive oil a few times a week. The vitamin C in them helps your body build collagen. Collagen is the material that keeps your muscle fibers stretchy and resilient instead of brittle. Think of a good new rubber band instead of an old dry one that snaps when you pull it. I remember waking up one morning expecting my shoulders to be locked up tight from all the heavy yard work I had done the day before, and they just were not. The stiffness was a fraction of what it used to be. The oxygen was finally getting to the tissue. The fourth thing I found is something you do not usually see wrapped in plastic at the big chain supermarkets. You have to look a little harder for it, but the effort pays off immensely. Arbutus berries. Some folks out west call them madrone berries. I remember my wife Linda coming home from a farmer's market a few towns over with a little wooden basket of these bright red bumpy berries. I asked her what on earth they were. She told me the fellow selling them said they were like armor for aging muscles. Naturally, I was highly skeptical. I am a practical man, and I do not buy into magic solutions. But I did my homework. I found out these berries have a ridiculous amount of flavonoids and tannins. They literally stop the natural breakdown of your muscle tissue. When we hit 60, our bodies start treating our muscles like they are expendable material. These berries send a chemical signal to stop the tear-down process. They have more than double the vitamin C of regular oranges. I started mixing a small handful into some plain yogurt after my morning walks. There was a fellow named Bill I used to work the docks with years ago. Bill is 71 now, and his legs had gotten so weak he was relying heavily on a thick wooden cane just to get down his driveway to the mailbox. I brought him a jar of these berries I got from the market. I sat with him on his porch and told him to eat a few every single day. It was not an overnight miracle because nothing real ever is, but about 8 weeks later I drove past his house and saw him walking to his mailbox. The cane was in his other hand, hovering an inch above the ground. He was not leaning his weight on it anymore. His legs were holding his own weight again. That brings me to the fifth discovery, and this one was a very tough lesson for me to learn. For a long time I thought that if I just ate more meat, I would keep my muscle mass. I would eat a big steak or a couple of heavy chicken breasts, thinking all that protein would go straight to my legs and shoulders. But my daughter Megan had to give me a harsh reality check. She looked at me and said, "Dad, your body is not processing protein the way it did when you were 40. She explained that you can eat a whole cow, but if your stomach cannot break it down properly, it just passes right through you and your muscles keep starving. That is exactly where the yellow kiwi comes into the picture. Not the fuzzy green ones we are all used to seeing, but the smooth golden yellow ones. They contain a natural enzyme inside them called actinidin. This enzyme acts like a crew of workers breaking down the heavy protein you eat so your aging body can actually absorb it and use it to rebuild your muscle fibers. Plus, they knock out that oxidative stress in your muscles by almost 40%. I started eating one yellow kiwi every single morning, right before I ate my eggs. The difference in my physical energy was something I could feel deep in my bones. I was not getting that heavy, sluggish feeling in my gut after breakfast anymore. The protein was actually making it to my muscles where it belonged. We have 2 more left on this list, and I am telling you right now, I saved the heaviest hitters for last. The next one is something that might be growing right in your own neighborhood, and the final one is the exact reason my doctor looked at my leg scan in pure disbelief. But before I get to those, I want you to stop and think about something for a minute. Think about the guys you grew up with. Think about the men and women you know right now who are over 65. How many of them have simply accepted that shrinking, getting weak, and losing their balance is just the mandatory price of getting old? How many of them use the words, "I cannot do that anymore" on a daily basis? It is a tragedy, and if we are being honest, it is mostly because of pride. We do not want to admit to anyone that we are losing a step, so we hide it. We stop doing the things we love. We sit down more often. And the more we sit in that recliner, the faster the muscle vanishes from our frames. I know this because I almost let it happen to me. I almost let my pride put me in a wheelchair. But you do not have to do that. You just have to be willing to change the fuel you put in your engine and give your body a fighting chance. The sixth fruit is something I used to walk past every single summer without giving it a second thought. Loquats. They are these little golden orange fruits that hang on trees in people's backyards all over the place. I used to think they were just a nuisance that fell on the sidewalk and made a sticky mess. But then I stumbled onto some research from the American Heart Association that completely changed my perspective. It turns out loquats are one of the very few natural sources of something called ursolic acid. Now, I do not care much for fancy chemical names, but I care a whole lot about what they do to my body. Ursolic acid is like a master command switch that tells your aging body to build muscle mass instead of eating it away. It actually fights sarcopenia directly. It reverses that muscle degeneration that steals our independence. I started seeking them out intentionally. I would eat 4 to 6 of them a day during their short season. I have a buddy from my old bowling league named Sam. Sam is 74 years old. He had gotten so frail over the years that his wife had to open simple glass jars for him in the kitchen. The shame in his eyes when he talked to me about it was hard to look at. I told him about the loquats. I told him to find them and start eating them every day. He thought I was chasing fairy tales, but he was desperate enough to do it. A few months later, he called me up on the phone. He did not say much at first. He just told me he had spent the entire morning working in his garden, pulling deep weeds out of the dirt with his bare hands, and he did not even need to ice his wrists afterward. The grip strength was finally coming back to him. And that leads me to the 7th one, the one I promised to tell you about. The one that changed the entire game for my legs and my future, wild blackberries. I'm not talking about the giant watery berries that are bred to sit in a plastic clamshell in the grocery store for 3 weeks. I'm talking about the small, deep purple, almost black ones that stain your fingers when you pick them. These tiny berries are loaded with compounds called anthocyanins. I remember the exact day I realized what they were doing for me. I was at Derek's house helping him move a massive solid oak dresser out of his guest room. 2 years prior to that moment, my legs would have been shaking uncontrollably under that kind of crushing weight. My knees would have felt like they were full of crushed glass and sand. But that day, as we hoisted that heavy oak up off the floor, my thighs felt completely solid. They felt like tree trunks. They did not shake. I did not feel that terrifying hollow weakness in my core. I felt completely grounded to the floor. I later read data from the National Institute on Aging, showing that eating a handful of these wild blackberries a day can reduce muscle breakdown by 25% in folks our age. 25%. They literally shield your muscle fibers from the daily wear and tear that usually breaks us down. When I finally went back in for my annual checkup and Dr. Evans ran that new DEXA scan to check my bone density and muscle mass, he pulled up the image on his computer and compared it side by side to the scan from 3 years ago. The scan from 3 years ago looked like a man who was on a fast track to needing a walker just to get to the bathroom. The current scan showed dense, solid, dark muscle tissue in my quadriceps and my calves. He looked at me in disbelief and asked me what kind of supplements I was taking. I told him I was not taking anything out of a plastic bottle. I told him I was just eating the right things. I told him about the wild blackberries staining my oatmeal every morning, the smooth yellow kiwi, the prunes. I told him I simply refused to let my legs rot out from underneath me while I sat in a chair. The profound relief I feel right now, knowing I can walk up a steep flight of stairs without grabbing the wooden handrail like my life depends on it, is hard to put into words. When my 4-year-old grandson comes running at me full speed across the yard, I can firmly brace my legs, catch him, and lift him high up in the air without that terrifying worry that my back is going to give out or my knees are going to buckle under the weight. That is what this is actually about. This is not about looking like a young bodybuilder. It is about keeping your freedom. If your legs go, your freedom goes right out the front door with them. Muscle does not just disappear overnight. It leaves your body when you stop giving it a reason to stay, and when you stop giving it the raw materials it desperately needs to rebuild itself. You do not have to wait until getting out of a low chair becomes a 5-minute ordeal that makes you sweat. You can start making changes tomorrow morning. Go chop up some prunes. Find some dark red grapes with thick skins. Get your hands on some wild blackberries. Put them in your body and let them do the exact work they were designed by nature to do. I am not sitting here promising you that you will wake up tomorrow morning with the legs of a 20-year-old man. I am telling you that you can stop the bleeding. You can rebuild the foundation you thought was gone forever. I'm going to be right here sitting on this porch figuring this out one single day at a time, and I will keep sharing exactly what actually works for me. Because we work too damn hard our whole lives to spend our retirement stuck in a chair watching the world happen through a window. Go get your legs back. I will see you around.